Hi guys. Hi. How are you?
Linda, nice to
Yeah.
meet you.
And
Matt, lovely
you?
to see you.
Good to
Okay.
see you, Rupert.
Congratulations on the movie. I watched it extremely recently, so it's still very much fresh in my head. And I'm going to start with you, Matt. What was it about this particular story that made you want to make this movie, really?
Well, it was a gift. I had the gift of meeting Karl-Heinz Schnabel, who at the time was the last surviving member of Helmut's resistance group. Of course, you've seen the film. So his best friend, Karl, he was in his late 70s when I met him in 2001. He shared his story, just his firsthand account of his best friend Helmut Hübener and their resistance efforts together. And it just blew me away. And I just knew I was at the time I was a documentary filmmaker, and so we made a documentary here in the United States for PBS, and the story still wouldn't let go of me. So started writing it as a feature script even way back then. I've just been one of those stories that I just felt so strongly about. My friendship with Karl, he kind of entrusted me to, well, he asked us to share his story and Helmut's story with the world, and I've just been carrying that with me.
Um, Rupert, I gather your character is a kind of not officially a real character, but it's a kind of amalgamation of other officers. Can you tell me more about that character and what were you told about the story before working on this, really?
Um, well, I think, I mean, Matt will be more of an authority on this, but I think he is a real character. He is, I can assure you, he is a real character. And he was certainly, very much a part of the narrative described, I think, to Matt through the documentary. So this is a man who certainly was very much a part of this story, and hunted these boys or one, this one person that he perceived to be as the sort of troublemaker, the person who was writing these, this propaganda as he saw it, anti-Hitler propaganda as he saw it, throughout Hamburg. So, and for me, it was just an extraordinary. I mean, I just couldn't believe that this true story hadn't really, been made into a movie. Hadn't the story hadn't sort of been, wasn't out there, for the public to see. So it just utterly captured my imagination. And what's interesting about, my character really, Owen, is that, he's not although he is a Gestapo policeman, he's not someone who, he's not incredibly at the top of the tree. He's not, Hitler's number two. He is actually just a sort of a working, policeman, a Nazi, a working Nazi, as there were in those times, many of. And, I think um, he had he believed in the sort of, in the rhetoric, in the sort of, in the sort of Third Reich, in their sort of ideology, really. And I think through the story we see that actually his own beliefs are tested, and suddenly, one of his children die, and he realizes that actually all is not as he thought. And so really for me it was the arc of the character that completely, yeah, it just completely captured my imagination. And he goes through such a change. And the truth is that I don't think he would ever have done what these boys have done. He realizes that he doesn't have that strength and that moral compass, which I think they have, and that shocks him, particularly as he has children. And I think that, he questions everything because of that.
Yeah, and these are very young boys. Matt, I'll go back to you. There's a really wonderful quote at the end of the movie from Alexei Navalny, who is a hero to many, around the world. Talk me through what made you pick that particular quote. I can't remember it exactly, so if you can just remind me what the quote said.
Sometimes the greatest act of rebellion is to simply tell the truth. And Yes, I also have been following, and of course, I'd been following Navalny since before the documentary that won the Academy Award, called Navalny. But seeing that documentary and then reading his book, which came out after his death, after he was murdered by another authoritarian regime, and just seeing, I saw these similarities between a peaceful resistance fighter. He was trying to use the power of the truth and the power of the spoken word and the written word to stand up to authoritarianism. And we all know what happened to him. He actually, was murdered in prison just weeks before we started filming. And so I kind of carried that into production with me. Yes, it did once we were editing this and I was reading his book and saw that quote and just thought that to me just spoke perfectly to what Helmut was standing for as well. And it was an example that it's still happening. Um,
Can we talk about your choice? I know it's kind of like a little bit complex when you were telling a story of of people who are not Anglophone. So it's a decision you have to make of making the film in English, and you've cast a group of British young actors. Talk me through that decision, and was there ever a thought or any sort of, like, were you ever um, meant to do it in German? And was that a difficult decision to come to?
It's a good question. My co-writer for 20 plus years on this project lives in Vienna. Perfectly fluent in German, raised in Germany and in Austria. And so there were discussions about how do we approach that. And I've always approached this project with kind of my mantra has been finding the highest common denominator. So to make something that's accessible to the masses, but is also artful, and part of that decision process for me really was deciding, okay, I want this to be able to reach beyond 2.5 countries in Europe, in German. I want this to be able to reach a worldwide audience, but at the same time, I want to be, I don't want to be tone deaf. I want Germans to be able to watch this and feel like we got it, if that makes sense. And so I was really, there was a lot of intentional decisions about I knew that once we decided we're going to shoot it in English, I knew I wanted a European cast. I knew we were going to go to the UK to cast it. There's always that decision about how do you handle the accents? This actually took place in German. We're shooting it in English. Do you do, what Spielberg did? Spielberg did on Schindler's List, where they did everything with the German accent. Do you do something more like what Polanski did on The Pianist, where they're speaking basically in British accents, but with just a flavor of Polish or German when they're saying certain words? I went with what Polanski had set up in Pianist that really resonated for this, and particularly because we have four young actors, incredible young actors who are the leading this film, and I just felt like I didn't want to burden them as well in their performance with laying another accent on top of that. And so kind of a long answer to your question, but that informed why we went with the approach that we did regarding which language we're shooting it in and what kind of accent we're doing.
If you don't mind me saying, I think that was the right decision. I think that really worked. And I was really worried at the beginning whether it was going to go the route of doing the accent, which I always find a little bit takes you out of the story a little bit. I'm going to go back to you, Rupert. You spoke, I think you touched upon the moral ambiguity of your character. This is a guy who he's just a guy. He's just someone doing his job, and there were so many people just doing their job. Was it difficult for you to try and put yourself in the mind of somebody like that? When you went home at night after playing him, was there ever a thought in your head that what would I have done had I been that person at that time?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, it's interesting because after filming, I think, I often do have those thoughts and I have time. But I think when we're in the middle of it and preparing, I often try and, it's interesting, isn't it? Because nobody thinks themselves evil. Nobody thinks themselves as the bad guy. That's a subjective thing. So I often, look initially for the humanity of every character, regardless of outwardly what they do in the story. And I think for Erwin, his family is everything, and his children are everything, and the benefits or the status that his job allows him affords his family is something that I think he holds, he prizes. And I think that was my focus, really, was through, his humanity. He doesn't see what he's doing as a bad thing. He sees it as, as part of, the greater good. So I think for me, that was where I started. So I was so grateful to Matt and Ethan, the writers of the film, that there were a number of, amazing scenes, family scenes, really. And that really helped create, for me, an understanding of who this person was. And yeah, and I it's interesting, isn't it? Because I don't know. We all, I often wonder what I would do, if I was in that position. I often wonder about, the war in general. Would I be would I have signed up? Would I be a conscientious objector? I struggle with all that. I really do. My grandfather was at D-Day, and fought in World War II. My father was in the sort of territorial army, which was a sort of, which they called in Britain the TA, which is a sort of part-time off the back of his father. And so it's kind of, I struggle with it. I struggle with it. So I do find it very interesting delving into characters that hold very, very particular views. And I think it's important that, it's important that I, as the actor, don't necessarily, well, I don't at all. I don't judge them. I look for its humanity, and that's where I start, really.
Matt, I want to go back to you because you're releasing this through Angel Studios, who also made Bonhoeffer, which I really liked. I don't know if you've seen it as well, which I thought, again, another story about, that kind of moral ambiguity throughout the Nazi Germany, really. I'm really interested in knowing how does that were you picked up by Angel, or were you working with them straight away? And another thing I want to ask about, because they had become known as a kind of faith-based studio. However, I've noticed that over the last few months they've actually been broaching more universal subjects, which I think is fantastic to know. Talk me through that relationship with them.
Thank you. We actually, we were in development for years on this project, and Angel Studios, ironically, our offices are literally like 3 minutes apart. We could walk between each other's offices, and we do now. But we hadn't met each other. We kind of thought. So one day we just went to lunch, said, "Hey, we should talk," and brought up this project. They had actually seen the documentary that I did, years earlier, and loved the story, and so they felt like, hey, this is something that we would really be interested in. And so we made great sense to partner up with them. It's been this incredible experience of that now going into development with them and creating this film. Yes, we went in with it, because their first kind of breakout hit that they distributed was, a series about Jesus, kind of created this impression, or I think a reality that there was a faith-based element to it. This project has never been a faith-based project for me. There are elements to it. The boys are these Mormon boys, and I get all that, but from my perspective and from our perspective as filmmakers, it was no more a faith-based story or project than Schindler's List was. And so we have worked closely with Angel to try and make sure that the way that it's presented gets outside of that kind of that narrower faith-based thing, which unfortunately has a pejorative kind of tone to it when people say, "Oh, it's a faith-based film," and I get it. But yeah, we've tried to work really hard with Angel to market it much more broadly, and of course, they also do want to broaden their, both their base, if you will, but also the way that they're perceived.
Mm. Um, Now that you've worked with them on this, do you think are there any sort of projects in the future that you think you might want to carry on with them, and including with the fabulous group of actors you've worked with?
Yes, there sure is. If you saw at the end, okay, it's just between us, right? I'll give a little thing here. If you saw at the end of the film where it talks about what happened to Karl, that 2 weeks before, the war ended, he was forced into the German army and captured and spent 4 more years as a POW in Russia. Because Karl and I became such close friends, he shared a lot of details about that experience and him coming back after that. And it's just incredible. And we're writing that script now. That's about all I can say. Just to say that there's real interest on all of our parts to tell his story as well.
And Rupert, can I ask what other projects you're working on in the
Right
next?
now, I'm just finishing off. I'm doing a thing for Disney Plus, The Rivals season
Oh,
two.
yeah.
And I've just finished an ITV thing over here in the UK. I think Linda, you're based in the UK, aren't you? I think
I
so.
am,
Yeah.
yes, yeah, yeah.
I've read your stuff for I think the Daily Mail and stuff, and no,
Um,
Daily Mail. Daily Mail.
Mirror, the Mirror, yeah.
That's right. That's right. I remember now. Your name's flashed past me a few times. So
Thank
yeah,
you.
I'm just doing stuff. A thing called Reasonable Doubt, which was a 6-part drama. I've just done with David Morrissey. So I've just finished that, and then I'm just doing The Rivals for a bit, and then I'm just waiting for Matt to get his act together so we can work together again.
Oh,
I'm
fantastic.
ready, man. Let's do it.
But yeah,
Yeah.
we will at
Well,
some point.
yeah.
I'm
Well,
sure.
I really enjoyed the movie. I thought it was so beautifully done, and I think you can tell that it's a documentarian making it because your commitment to the truth is fantastic. So yeah, I really enjoyed it, and again, congratulations. You did a fabulous job on this. Thank you.
Thank you
Well,
so
Linda,
much.
thank you for having us on your show. We really appreciate it. You guys,
Thanks, Rupert. Thank you. Congrats.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Hey You Guys!
Hey, you guys!
Hey you guys!
Hey, that's what they all say.
Hey you guys!
Hey, you guys!